Okay, hey, this is Paul Sakis. I'm speaking with Abigail Esman. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good to see you.
You've written a book, Rage, Narcissism, Patriarchy? Patriarchy?
Patriarchy.
That guy too. And the Culture of Terrorism. Oh, my, look, I better
Yeah,
put
it's a
this phone
cheerful,
upside.
it's a cheerful book.
Is my phone going to blow up? Oh, my God. All right. Well, I tell you, the Culture of Terrorism. All right. Well, we do the International Day of Peace events. We've been doing it for almost 20 years, since 2002. We do a concert in Central Park. I have Times Square. And so I'm into this peace movement. I'm a John Lennonist. I believe in no countries. I just did a United Nations kind of thing. And so you're talking to people who just want to hug everybody and have a good time. Um, but you wrote a book about the culture of terrorism or domestic abuse. There's some serious words here. Why do you write about these serious? Is this a book that's not true? Is this true? This book?
It's true.
All right,
It's all true.
that's a sad statement. Hope you don't
It's
mind.
not a sad statement. It's a lot of it is about my own life and my own experience with domestic abuse. But it's a book that ends with hope and with things that we can do. You know, the better you understand a problem, the better you can solve it. And we haven't solved it yet, so clearly we haven't understood it. And I'm hoping that this is one way to get there.
Okay, and I agree with you entirely. Unless you know you have a problem, one, until you have some education that there's a scenario and that there's a, in essence, maybe a way out. And hope is a very important word. We have a movie we just finished, Woodstock Forever. I did the 20th anniversary with Richie Havens, and he sings about freedom.
Wow.
But my movie's called Peace, Love, and Hope. Hope, and it's always good because today's a new day, right? So the things that were yesterday are history, right? Tomorrow's the mystery, and today's the present. So tell me about what you're doing here. And this is a book.
This is a book. This is a book called Rage, but unlike the other book called Rage, which is about Donald Trump, this is more about Trumpism. Um, it's Rage, Patriarchy, Narcissism, Patriarchy, and the Culture of Terrorism. It's a way that I'm trying to show the links between domestic abuse and terrorism, both in terms of how we experience them and how domestic abusers are like terrorists, and how many terrorists have experienced domestic abuse either as abusers or victims.
Oh,
So it's all very interlinked.
oh, this is interesting. I did a series I worked on for 2 years of my life called The Brain. This thing up here, and some people,
That thing is very connected to what I
oh,
wrote
some people it's here in the back end.
about.
And so, so that, but we had neuroscientists, so they were talking about these things and talking about, some people's brains are like even pushed against something else, and it causes, there's no such thing as a perfect brain, I think, and so that's, I think that even came up in one story, about somebody that caused some problems in this world.
Well,
So
what's interesting, one of the things
brain,
that I found in my research for
yeah,
rage is that there are, in fact, connections in the brain that have been defined by neuromagnetic imaging. There is an empathy center, for instance, and it can be stimulated. It can be increased. And the more empathy you have, the less likely you are to be narcissistic. The less likely you are to be narcissistic, the less likely you are to go into narcissistic rage and have a us them mentality, a hierarchical mentality, all those things that go into those two things, which are domestic abuse and terrorism. So it is very much linked to the brain.
yeah, it all is the whole. In Yiddish, we call it mishpucha. The whole family, the whole gamut of everything is linked to the brain. You can't even walk without it. So let's talk about your book, and because and thank you for writing this book, because it's an important subject, and if you heal one person as a result of this book, you have done a very nice thing. And so, what are some of the things in here that somebody, is it somebody living with domestic violence possibly can learn, or
I,
somebody around them can suggest to somebody, or is it a therapist can learn a little more about another example of scenarios?
I mean, my hope in writing this was to make the public more aware of domestic abuse and why domestic abuse doesn't just affect the victims. It affects society as a whole. There are direct connections between, for instance, between misogyny and a likelihood of terrorism and violent action. There are direct connections between people who are abused and people who become violent. So all of those things are things that it doesn't just affect the family involved, it affects all of us. And that's one of the things I wanted to get through. Having said that, I talk about my own experience with domestic abuse and a lot of anecdotes of incidents that I lived through, which I think and I hope will help open people's eyes if they feel that someone near them is being abused, or they want to understand why women stay. It's usually women. I mean, I don't need to say men aren't abused because they are, but it is usually women. And there's always that question, well, why does she stay? She must deserve it. All of those things I address in Rage.
So where do we start? Where do you start? You fall in love with somebody? Is it love? Is love the culprit and the answer at the same time?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
I don't know if it is a question. I think it's a statement.
Okay.
I do a lot of like, it's just, is love, okay, could love, if I made it a question, that might be, I have to think too much now. Could love be the heart of the problem and also the solution to the problem in a domestic violence situation? That somebody loves somebody so much that they do a lot of things to maintain that love, to keep that love, as you say, to stay in a situation. And there's a love that then somehow somebody gains some knowledge enough to say, why am I doing this to this person? I actually love them.
No, that never happens. That
So,
almost never happens.
so a domestic violent person is just plain old, very clearly stated, a domestically violent person that doesn't have control of themselves, right?
Yeah, because it's connected to their personality type. And unless they go through tremendous amounts of therapy, it's highly unlikely that they will change. Very few domestic abusers do change. And that's partly because most domestic abusers suffer from pathological narcissism. And a narcissist is a very bad target for therapy because he thinks he's perfect.
Uh-huh. And so let's the one that I have this in my peace day activities. Actually, I have domestic violence because there's many organizations that deal with domestic violence. I've done many shows on domestic violence, and there's even companies like an Allstate, I believe, that has a tremendous outreach for domestic violence. Some of these insurance companies, because that does pertain to their own business. Household domestic violence is problematic. It could wreck the entire house, and it could have to deal with an insurance company. So what do you suggest here for I guess the scenario? So let's talk to the woman in the house of a domestic violent man. Run? What should she do?
Running, it's very individual and situation specific. But I would never tell a woman to run because that's when she's at her most vulnerable. You know, more domestic homicides happen when the woman leaves. So you can't just run. You need to have a plan. You need to have things sort of in place before you go. The more important thing that I would try to tell somebody who decides to leave is that when she leaves, she needs to understand what she's leaving is behind her. There is no going back. It will not get better. It will never get better. He will apologize. He will promise. He will do all of these things. It will not get better. When you leave, you are starting a new life. and it's a life of promise. It's a life of freedom. Don't go back. That's the one thing I would say more than anything is don't go back.
Because you went back?
Um,
You don't mind me asking? I don't
I
know.
don't
I didn't read
mind
your
you
book.
asking. My situation was one where in the first instance, there were two. In the first instance, I left for college. So there was no going back because I left. In the second instance, no, I did not go back. I knew it was over.
Well, I didn't read your book. I didn't know. Maybe this is too personal too. I don't
That's
know.
okay.
I didn't read anything. I was just talking to you. You say left for college. Was this domestic violence in your own home?
No, no,
Oh,
no. It was a boyfriend
oh,
in high
okay.
school.
Sorry. I just
That's all right.
it seemed to get
I write about it very openly in the book, so
it
it's
seemed a
okay.
little confusing. Was that your first love?
No, but I was young, and so I was young enough that when he told me it was normal, um, I didn't have that much to compare it to. You know, I assumed that he was older. He was a couple of years older, and he must know.
So, you're still a young girl, let's say, and well, you're young now, and you were a young girl then.
I'm
And
not that
how was
young.
your relationship, if you don't mind me asking? Because this is very personal stuff, and thank you for sharing it because you want to help others, obviously, or you wouldn't have.
I'm married to a wonderful, wonderful man.
Well, what I was going to say is at the time, earlier on, I'm happy for you, you are. Um, uh, did you have any relationship, in a good relationship or no relationship, enough to have a conversation with your parents that this guy is being abusive to me?
Oh, this is something, particularly this was in the 70s. So in the 70s, domestic abuse was something that no one talked about. And it certainly wasn't something that happened in the kind of Upper East Side, New York intellectual world that I grew up in. Um, so there was this enormous stigma attached, which still exists, fortunately, and thanks in many ways to Joe Biden and the Violence Against Women Act. It no longer is quite as bad as it was at the time. But I would never have told anyone, and most people don't tell. You don't tell. You don't tell for two reasons. You don't tell because it's shameful, but you also don't tell because if you do, people will expect you to leave, and you may not be ready to leave.
It would seem to me, and as I had these conversations, there's this big domestic violent phone bank out of Texas. I remember interviewing them a few times. Um, but me, I would be scared, Liz. I would be scared to leave. I'd be scared I would be strangled or scared I'd be hurt more so. I mean, it's got to be freaking terrifying, this scenario, because unfortunately, the reality is that they can come after you again.
Yes, they
And
can.
they can
And
run. I mean, physically run after you or,
yeah,
find you.
they can.
I'd
And they
still be
can
scared
find
if I were you to talk about it even.
and what well, I'm not.
I should.
But it also, and this is part of the point that I make in Rage, this is exactly what happens in terrorism. We have this same question of, do we attack back? Do we stay silent? How do we react to a terrorist attack? And a terrorist himself is often as frightened of the person who abused him, and therefore he uses his power, his violence against others. So it becomes a chain reaction, and it's both familial, but it's also societal, and that's the culture of terrorism.
Well, thank you for writing this and speaking out about it. And rage, narcissism. Say that word again.
Patriarchy.
Patriarchy. What does patriarchy mean?
It's a male dominating society, male dominated society.
See, yeah, that's not me. That's why I can't say it. And the
Probably.
culture of terrorism. Okay. Well, congratulations. Let me ask you one last question since we are involved with peace. I asked thousands of people, actually, what is peace for them? So for you, I actually feel like it's actually it has more depth, more meaning than most people I ever asked this. You know, most people are living this happy little Disney thing, and not, you know, talking about what we're talking about. But I'm gonna, you'll answer it however you want, today or yesterday. What does peace mean to you?
Freedom. It's that simple. That's what peace means to me.
Okay, Richie Havens would be happy you'd be saying that. All right, thank you very much. Nice
Thank
speaking
you,
with you.
Paul.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.